Now, a couple of weekends back, more than 500,000 people, they spent the night in Melbourne CBD, thrilled by bright lights and colourful display. It was White Night. It was vivid, which is, of course, what Sydney calls its festival of lights and brightness. This is Blueprint for Living. I'm Jonathan Green, and this is the last half hour. This week, we dive deep into the vivid. No, that's just white noise. We want colour. Yes, that's a little more vivid. Zena O'Connor can help us with our little study. She is a designer, consultant and colour expert. Zena, what's your favourite colour?
I'm often asked that. And to tell you the truth, I don't have a favourite, although I would possibly tend to lean towards the reds of the spectrum.
Okay, well, that's vivid enough. Is our response to colour, is it cultural or something intrinsic in our little brains?
Look, it's a little bit of both. We're not technically hardwired to respond to colour, except in terms of the circadian cycle. But we certainly do acquire a lot of our beliefs about colour from our culture and our social conditioning. So it's probably predominantly more the cultural and social conditioning where we get a lot of our beliefs about colour. Beliefs
like what? That's an intriguing way of expressing that.
Well, beliefs like blue is calming, red is arousing, and so on. Pop colour psychology is full of those sorts of claims.
It certainly is.
But I can tell you now that no amount of blue will calm me down when I've had an argument with my husband. And as much red as I might like to wear, I'm certain I won't get that date with George Clooney. So,
and yet we still see the red dress. I mean,
yes. Well, red does have attentional advantage in that respect, and I tend to deal with evidence-based colour strategies, and there are some research findings that support certain responses to colour, like the red dress. Apparently, a woman wearing red is just as important to a man as facial symmetry and a waist to hips ratio. So red does play a big part at that very primal level.
Do we know why?
Well, it is a Western cultural thing. The Scarlet Woman, red does have that attentional advantage. Red can certainly make the complexion look pretty fantastic. I went to see Dita Von Teese last night, and her red lipstick certainly makes her incredibly sexy.
Zena O'Connor is a colour expert. Lawrence Johnston is a documentary filmmaker. Speaking of red, well, his latest film is Neon. So, Lawrence, neon is such an extraordinary thing in a city. It sort of redefines the city space in a way that's both bright and dark.
It does. It's one of the most dynamic inventions I think ever created in terms of creating something that humans respond to in terms of light. Because, as you know, in terms of the way we live, light and darkness are basically, they're a part of our very being and the way we feel positive or negative in the world. But the visual beauty of neon, particularly red neon, is something that burns at you, through the darkness of night or when you're driving in the rain and things like that. So it has quite an emotional effect, I believe.
Or flickers into the murdering bedroom.
Well, it does. And, in the Neon film, we explore a number of things about that. And one of them is neon in the movies. Everything from Janet Leigh driving to the Psycho Bates Motel through the rain where she's attracted by the neon sign. So in popular culture, neon had a role in the mid-20th century, basically about attraction or revulsion. And when neon actually started to fall under the wayside, in American society particularly, it was seen as darkness. So in film noir, you would see neon was always a code that something bad was going to happen to the character.
Where did it come from?
It came from France, and it was invented by a number of people with small incremental aspects of bringing it together. It's essentially glass, gas and electricity, and Claude Neon was the person who was most famous for creating it because he saw the potential for human, again, coming back to our reaction to light, for advertising.
And each light, each sign, each twist and turn is lovingly handmade.
Well, that's the fabulous thing about neon. One of the things that attracted me to investigate it far more and to make it into a film, which is a feature doc, because one has to have a story, and it is an amazing story. How it came, it's an immigrant story in a sense, because it came to America and then basically was treated in certain ways throughout history, which we kind of go into from the beauty of its initial arrival and impact, and then obviously its downfall too.
Well, it becomes this symbol of for a particular period in the 20th century, this symbol of prosperity, of a culture on the make.
Yeah, it was particularly used very well in Las Vegas, as everybody knows,
Yes.
and on grand scale as well. Some of the neon constructions are stories high, and even people who are saving them, because obviously some are original, but obviously when you're going to leave them out to pasture, they rust and whatever, but then they still have to be taken down. And there's a place in Las Vegas where they save them called the Neon Boneyard.
And then in a culture like Australia, we see that American example. We want to replicate it here. We want our own lights and signs. It's a sign of our development, our sort of cultural awareness.
Well, neon, as I mentioned, went basically downhill, and for a number of reasons throughout, it was superseded by other sort of signs and things. But nice to see in Melbourne particularly a lot of new neon, smaller scale, and usually to do with shapes and objects and things to attract you, particularly in Fitzroy, and you'll find it along Chapel Street as well.
It's very cute now, very cool and trendy, as you say, those little microcosms. But once upon a time, the Coca-Cola sign in King's Cross, the skipping girl in Melbourne.
Well, we also in Melbourne had the Allen Sweet sign over the river, you may recall, and it was an incredible one.
I am old enough.
With the lollies, that would sparkle and shimmer and stuff. And, anyone who's into neon's always wondering whatever happened to those things. Is it in a warehouse or did it go to the skip or whatever? So
what does happen to them here?
Well, it depends on whether people care. But the thing about neon, it's all to do with money as well. It's like actually taking them down when they're on a grand scale. But then we have other ones like the Skipping Girl that you've mentioned, which have been, basically saved and exist and work.
In our exploration of Vivid, we have been looking at neon. Lawrence, thank you. Lawrence Johnston is a filmmaker, and yes, neon is the film. Seek that out. Zena O'Connor, she's a colour expert. Zena, our cities, never mind the lights, but the buildings themselves, they used to be so grey, but that palette is getting broader now.
Yes, definitely. In previous eras, buildings were the colour of natural construction materials. And then, of course, in last century, it was very much the modernist palette. The white gods was what Tom Wolfe referred to those architects as. They used this palette that was white, grey, steel colours and black. But over the last, maybe 50 years, perhaps since Le Corbusier, more and more colour has been used in the built environment, and it definitely humanises the built environment. It can add a sense of humour, it can break down those barriers, and it can certainly encourage engagement, pretty much the way that Vivid Sydney does, the festival in Sydney.
Yes. Well, as we mentioned too, White Night in Melbourne, and one of the stalwarts of those festivals is the illumination of the built environment, of the buildings of our cities. Andrew Walsh is a festival director. He's the former director of White Night Melbourne. So, Andrew, into darkness must come light. People seem to love a bright, vivid show.
They do, and it's becoming more popular, I think. But it goes back a long way. I mean, the idea of using light as part of celebration and community gatherings goes back a long way. Perhaps the most famous light festival is the Fête de Lumière in Lyon, and it goes back to the 1600s.
Wow, an antidote to the dark, of course. It wards it off.
Well, it was an antidote to the plague. So it was the idea of putting candles in your windows to ward away the plague, and then they became little sort of illuminated backlit lamps, and then that became a mass lighting of things. And then as technology progressed, it became a a light festival now that attracts several million people.
But these light festivals, I mean, we no much as much as we see Vivid in Sydney, White Night in Melbourne, we still have this sense of wonder when these things unfold before us. It's a thing that really can transport us.
Well, I think it's that thing of turning the mundane and the everyday into something else. So it's that sort of transformative thing of you mindlessly walk down the main street every day to go to the office, and then one night you walk down the main street and it's a completely different space. It's the fantasy that perhaps is running in your head as you wander off to your slave.
It's astounding it should be so shared. I mean, White Night just passed in Melbourne. More than 500,000 people are wanting to embrace this sense of the vividness of their city. Suddenly, there aren't many things that are so common to all of us as a source of excitement.
No, and it's very simple. It's not like a sort of a sporting event or any of that sort of thing. I think part of it is that sort of shared humanity thing. Part of it's the wonder. I think the illuminations and all of the sort of techno things that are available now are part of it. But the thing that I think that attracts people is people's desire to be together.
Be together, but together in that shared sense, and the thing is so simple. I mean, as you say, there is so much in our world now that entertains us in so many complex and very deep ways. But a feast of bright light, a surprising vista, a transformation of a common setting through light it's such a simple but potent thing.
It is a simple and potent thing, and it can be as simple as just a whole bunch of candles, floating down a river, right up to really really sort of over the top state of the art technology, and the technology changes all the time. But it is, going back to what I was saying before, I think it is that thing about transforming space. It's that wonder. It's probably that sort of childlike wonder as well. It gives people an opportunity to frolic. Frolic in the illuminations.
As you say, it is the thing around the world. I mean, a lot of cities have this. This is such a shared thing in all sorts of cultures as well.
Oh yeah, so White Night is an example. There are about 25 White Nights around the world. The most famous is Nuit Blanche in Paris, which was probably the start of the modern White Night movement. But then there's all sorts of other lighting festivals, religious ones, ones that ward off, the winter, pagan ones, which I guess are religious as well. So yeah, it's across the globe and it's across cultures, absolutely.
I wonder why. I wonder, we have this sort of the thrill of the transformation of our cities that these festivals bring. I wonder why we don't make some of it permanent. Why don't we have all sorts of wacky projections in public spaces as a matter of course?
Well, that's happening, and there is a sort of an illuminated cities movement around the world now. One of the great examples of that's Hong Kong, which has a permanent illumination across the whole of the city. And that's happening more and more. In fact, there's an illuminated cities conference in Lyon in a few weeks' time.
That is rather swell. Andrew, thank you. That is illuminating and vivid in its way. Very kind.
My pleasure.
Last half hour here on Blueprint for Living. We're looking at vividness. Zena O'Connor is a colour expert. And Zena, I mean, colour can kind of be difficult and overwhelming. I mean, is that why people love vivid white so much?
Well, it's really the novelty value. We're not used to seeing fabulous white experiences. We're not used to seeing our buildings lit up with colourful illuminations. So to a certain extent, it is a novelty value that the colour certainly adds to our experiences. But what's happening now in the built environment is that colour's being used more and more and more to enliven and activate areas that might have been a little bit neglected or a little bit unused, especially sort of dark and neglected, underused plazas and laneways. Super graphics on the walls or super graphics on the roadbed are being incorporated to sort of enliven those precincts and draw more people to them. In Auckland, they're using very large brightly coloured dots on the road to calm the traffic down. And it's, in a way, it's the novelty value of that.
Everybody stops to have a look.
Yeah, the traffic slows down and pedestrians kind of slow down as well. So colour can certainly make changes in our environment, definitely.
It's an almost childish response. Toni Risson will take us a little deeper there. She's a social history researcher. She's also a lolly expert. So, Toni, the lolly counter, it is a feast of colour.
It is, Jonathan. And all the people that I've spoken to that lived through the earlier decades of the 20th century, I would say 90% of them referred to the lolly counter in terms of it being a treasure trove. So they were jewel-like, these brilliantly coloured, glistening things, sparkly things, glossy things, translucent things. So definitely the colour was part of the vividness of those memories for them.
And by design, I mean, this is the thing that tempts us, that draws us in, that has this, I want to eat that because it's so beautiful to look at.
That's right. And also they would mention the glass. And I think the glass gave it that tantalising sort of thing. Those lollies were so attractive and appealing, and they were so close, but the kids just couldn't put their little fingers on them.
Were there various colours that became, sort of popular in sequence? What were the oldest colours used in lolly making?
I think we've had bright and very vivid colours in lolly making for centuries, and I know there are stories in the 19th century when they were using like arsenic and things like that to get the green colour, where people actually died from eating lollies. So until we had food regulation, some of those colours were coming from the wrong sources, but I think we did have quite a lot of those primary colours early on.
Does it change over time? I mean, that the flavours change. Do the colours change too?
That's not something that I've really been aware of, colours changing, but certainly even though some of the tastes we've had with us for a long time, sherbet, for example, is a quite ancient product, and I think Alan Marshall talks about sherbet arriving in the 1910s, or actually before that when he was a child. So we've had that really sharp, tangy sensation in lollies for kids for a long time. But what I observed was that the decades of the Generation X, Generation Y, they were looking for a more extreme experience of lollies. And so the sour lollies that came out in the 80s and 90s, Warheads and Ghost Drops, things like that were a real challenge to put in your mouth.
Yes.
Some of them were tangy and exciting, but some of them were literally impossible to keep in your mouth, and that was part of the fun of them. Yeah, I think the later generations have been looking for sensation in their experience of lollies.
And then there's a wonderful relationship between colour and taste. I mean, peppermint is green, musk is pink, licorice is sort of a darky kind of thing, but there's no real reason why they have to be.
No, I was thinking about this before, where there are two aspects to the vividness that we associate with lollies, and that's the taste and the look of them. But they are completely inseparable, because I think sometimes if you close your eyes, sometimes you don't get the really clear, distinct flavours. I think people have done tests with that on milkshakes, that people can't really tell you what flavour it is if they can't see it. So, yeah, they are together, and I think some of the, like musk and licorice and peppermint, they're really distinct flavours. There's nothing bland about them. They're not like anything else. And so I think it's that clarity of taste that is one of the things that jogs people's memories and creates those memories for them.
Taste and colour. Toni, thank you. But the lolly shop, yes, the feast of colour. I can't imagine a red spearmint leaf, but maybe it's possible. We're talking about vividness here on Blueprint. Zena O'Connor, I wonder, can we overload? Can we get too much sound, colour and movement? Does it just then become a beige blur?
Oh, it doesn't become a beige blur, but it can certainly overload our senses. Yes, definitely. I don't know if you've been to any of those immersive colour installations, which can be quite hypnotic in a way, completely surrounded and drenched with yellow, or
yes.
and it, it's fun for a while, but after about 15 minutes, it's like, oh, get me back to reality. It can be a little bit too much. I'm a very visual person, and there have been quite a few movies which have been incredibly visually busy, and the impact on me is that I just shut down and go to sleep. I can't cope with the constant visual change. So perhaps if you're more visually inclined, it can be too much. Definitely, yes.
We sent Buffy Gorilla to, well, sample a sensory overload in an amusement parlour.
I haven't been in an arcade in years. It's astonishing in here. The bright lights, the loud sounds, it really does just take over your entire sensory experience. What should I play first? I've always wanted to try one of these dance games, but I don't have anyone to dance with. But I'm going to try it anyway. It's called In the Groove 3. Player 1. That's me, I guess. Says extreme motion can be dangerous. Good, clean dancing fun for all players. Here I go. Left. Oh, guys, I'm doing really badly. 6 misses. Oh no, this is not going well. Oh, I think I got one. This looks a little bit more my speed.
Score big tickets for putting all the balls into the milk jug.
I think I've lost at this one too. Oh, another ball.
Swish! Get to the top to win the bonus!
This one's even brighter than the last one, with pink and yellow and blue. And my ping pong balls that are bright orange and not going anywhere. I got one in. That was my most success yet. I think I'm actually going to win something. Space Invaders. I feel like I've heard of this before. This is another 2-player game, but I'm going to try just by myself. So I'm sitting in front of a bright red Space Invaders gun. Press start. I'm pressing the big red button.
Player 1 ready.
Whoa.
Press start. Player 2 ready. Ready. Go. Protect planets.
Woohoo! It's vibrating the gun. $28 points. I feel like that's pretty good. But this one is called Horseplay, and I need to knock the teeth out of this horse that has a very cheesy grin. Let's see what it sounds like. It's a giant gun. All right, let's see. Oh, I didn't knock any teeth. Oh, 1 tooth. 2 teeth. 4 teeth. 5. Am I gonna go all the way? Oh no, I missed it by 1 tooth.
No, come back now.
Oh, Zena, the vivid, it speaks directly to our inner child.
Yes, definitely, definitely. Look, children obviously love bright colours, and I guess we retain some of that ourselves as we grow older. So yeah, definitely, we're attracted to bright colours. colour is being used in a lot of healthcare and aged care settings.
Yep.
Exactly for that very reason.
Let's not fight it.
Yes, let's go with it.
Surrender
Enjoy
to the
it.
vivid. Zena O'Connor is a designer, consultant and colour expert. You're also joined by Toni Risson, Andrew Walsh and Lawrence Johnston. Your producers are Mira Radler-Gillies and Buffy Gorilla. Technical production, Kerry Dell. I'm Jonathan Green, and that is it for this week's last half hour here on Blueprint for Living.
Oh, yes.